Welcome to the Senate Committee on Education. We welcome those that are present here in Carson City, as well as online and by phone. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Dunbar-Lupe.
Here.
Senator Hardy.
Here.
Senator Hammond. Senator Lang.
Here.
Senator Buck. Senator Dennis.
Here.
Okay.
Senator Hammond's here, and Senator Doñate is presenting a bill, so just mark him when he gets here. Great. We do have a quorum. Just a reminder, keep yourselves muted when not speaking, silence your electronic devices. We haven't had to do that all year, but now that we have people in the actual room, make sure you silence your devices. And those that are online, if they stay muted unless they're speaking. And for all individuals present in our meeting, please always keep your face coverings on and maintain social distancing. Our committee information is available on Nellis, as are all the materials for the meeting. Those wishing to give public testimony must register to participate through Nellis and select a preferred method. If you register and make your committee by phone, you will receive an email confirmation with call-in information. You may submit written comments as outlined on the agenda. There is help on our help page. On each page, actually, there's a help tab. And make sure to testify, state, and spell your name and affiliation when you're speaking. Public comment will be at the end, limited to 2 minutes per person. And that's it. Oh, I do have these other, just for information, we do have capacity of 9 seats. So I know that as we get more and more requests for people to be in the room, if you register, you get put on the list. If somebody just wants to come in and there's room, then they'll be allowed in, or they'll be put on the list. But the ones that register online will be have the priorities. And check with Sergeant of Arms. Those of you that are here already know this, but anyone wishing to come in, make sure you check in with the Sergeant at Arms at the door. And if it's at full capacity, you may be placed on the waiting list. Any available seats will be given to those who have pre-registered through Nellis first, then anyone already approved to be in the building. So that means if you're not approved to be in the building and you're in the building, then you shouldn't be there. And please wait till the Sergeant Martin confirms that. And okay, and we still have all our testimonies and comments that can be done through phone. So with that, we're going to begin with our first bill. We're going to start out of order. We're going to start with AB 254, and then we'll go to the top of the agenda and go through there. So we've got the speaker with us here. It's good to have you with us. And I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on AB 254.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jason Frierson, Assemblyman for District 8 down in Clark County and Speaker of the Nevada State Assembly. Thank you for your time today in consideration of Assembly Bill 254, which addresses a number of policy changes regarding compensation of student athletes at the post-secondary level. With me this afternoon, I have Mr. Sebastian Ross and Ms. Karina Armstrong, both of whom are students from UNLV, who, with the chair's indulgence, will assist me with the presentation. When I say assist me with the presentation, in no uncertain terms, we are here because of them. They have been working on this, and I actually met Mr. Ross some years ago at UNLV, and this is something that, as you'll hear from the students, is something they have worked on for some time and feel very strong about. And I was pleased to have them, and quite frankly, again, am here with this bill because of them. Little background information. College athletes earn billions of dollars annually for their schools, television networks, apparel companies, and the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NC2A. According to the NC2A, more than 460,000 college students compete in collegiate sports. College athletes are a major revenue source for many athletic programs and schools, but how has that benefited the student athlete? The answer is very little. A study released last October by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that less than 7% of the revenue generated by the NC2A, more than $8 billion annually, actually makes its way to football and men's basketball players through scholarships and living stipends. Here's the direct quote from that study. While intercollegiate sports are often described as student activities undertaken by amateurs, the economic reality is that athletic departments have developed into a complex commercial enterprise that look far more like professional sports organizations. This lack of fairness for the college athlete has been a contentious issue for many years. Although this is likely to change soon, NC2A rules that are still in place prohibit these athletes from profiting from their names, images, and likenesses. This means they can't sign endorsement deals, sell autographs or memorabilia, earn money for appearances, or strike business deals based on their participation in college sports programs while they're enrolled in school on an athletic scholarship. There are 3 or 4 things that are happening at the national level that have bearing on this legislation that I'd like to highlight. The first was the step California took with its fair pay to play law enacted in September of 2019. That law lets student athletes endorse products and use their name, sport, and school to identify themselves, but prevents them from using school logos or other trademark property in the endorsements. This action launched a flurry of debate about what rights student athletes should have and the rules that the NC2A has had in place for decades. Almost immediately, Colorado and Florida followed California in passing similar legislation. And by the fall of last year, 33 other states had introduced related bills. In response, the NC2A raised concerns about having to deal with the patchwork of state laws and asked the United States Congress to adopt federal legislation addressing this matter. Congress did respond, with the Senate Commerce and Judiciary Committees both holding hearings on student-athlete compensation last July. In late December, a group of U.S. senators led by Cory Booker and Richard Blumenthal introduced Senate Bill 5062, the College Athletes Bill of Rights, which sponsors say will guarantee fair and equitable compensation, enforcement, health and safety standards, and improved educational opportunities for all college athletes. Among other things, the bill will give athletes revenue sharing rights and allow them to market their name, image, or likeness with minimal restrictions. It also calls for lifetime scholarships and increased financial aid for current and former college athletes with medical bills and other expenses from sports-related injuries, as well as illness from coronavirus. This bill will likely be reintroduced early on during the 117th Congress, and if it becomes law, will transform the economics of college sports. The next development is from the NC2A itself. After California's fair pay to play law passed and other states began to take action, in April of 2020, the NC2A announced that it supports rule changes which allow athletes to be compensated for use of their name, images, and likenesses. However, it's a position that any such deals would have to come from a third party. In that way, colleges and universities would still not be allowed to pay their athletes directly, so that athletes would not be considered employees of the institution. However, NC2A's revised rules are not expected to formally take effect until the start of the 21-22 academic year. The last development I'd like to mention concerns the United States Supreme Court's recent decision to hear 2 cases during its 2021 term. In the NC2A versus Alston and the AAC versus Alston, the Supreme Court will decide whether the NC2A eligibility rules for student athletes which prohibit pay to play violates antitrust laws. While the NC2A disallows pay to play, it does allow schools to reimburse student athletes for their reasonable and necessary academic and athletic expenses. The student athletes in this case claim that the NC2A student athlete payment limits are an anti-competitive restraint of trade in violation of federal antitrust law. As you can see, there are a significant number of actions taking place at the national level within the next year or so that will have an impact on student athletes. And for that reason, AB 254 also requires a study to review those matters during the interim. I will now go through the sections of the bill. Assembly Bill 254 contains 3 major components to address next steps. At this point, I'd like to walk you through those and the key provisions of the bill. First, in Section 5, the bill provides that a public or private post-secondary institution or the NC2A may not prevent a student athlete from being compensated for the use of their name, image, or likeness, or prevent the student from obtaining professional services. It also provides that the institution or the NC2A may not compensate the student athlete for use of their name, image, or likeness. The section also prohibits any related impact on the student athlete's scholarship. It also prohibits the NC2A from disallowing the student's participation in intercollegiate sports for such compensation or use of services, and further prohibits the organization from preventing the institution itself from participating in NC2A for that same reason. Additionally, an institution may adopt reasonable restrictions to ensure student athletes entering contracts are not contrary to the mission of the institution. The second significant portion of the bill is contained in Section 6, and this section has three major components. First, a student athlete is authorized to enter into a contract with an organization that provides for the compensation of the athlete for the use of that athlete's name, image, or likeness. Such an organization may not be either the institution they attend or the NC2A. Second, the contract itself may not conflict with any contract between the institution and the student athlete. And third, any such contract must be disclosed to the institution, and a procedure is specified when there's an alleged conflict between the contracts. Sections 6.3 and 6.7 provide that a student athlete may be required by an institution to receive education or training in contracts, financial literacy, or similar education. In addition, prospective student athletes will be required to disclose any previous existing contracts before signing a letter of intent with the institution. Finally, Section 8 of the bill requires the Interim Legislative Committee on Education to appoint a committee to study the use of name, image, and likeness of a student athlete. Membership of that study committee includes representatives from the Nevada System of Higher Education, student athletes, athletic coaches, program administrators, amongst others. The committee is charged with studying existing bylaws of state collegiate athletic associations as well as those of the NC2A. It must also review state and federal laws relating to compensating student athletes and report its findings to the Legislative Committee on Education for transmittal to the 2023 session of the Nevada Legislature. In closing, the discussion about economic exploitation of our college and university student athletes has been around for as long as I can remember. I have to commend California for taking the first legislative steps that have sparked this national debate. It's past time that we deal with this matter, and AB 254 is the vehicle Nevada needs to ensure our student athletes are treated fairly. On a personal note, having participated in Division I sports, I recognize that I attended UNR on a scholarship, and a lot of other folks attended the university on either athletic or non-athletic scholarships, or didn't get a scholarship at all. But that was in 1988 when I landed in Nevada, and 5 surgeries later on my left knee and my right shoulder, I jokingly note that I can still run if a dog is chasing me, but that's about as far as it's going to go. These athletes sacrifice their bodies, and they do it at the detriment of themselves, but at the significant benefit of institutions. And AB 254 intends to make sure that these student athletes are not compensated for playing, but compensated for use of their name and likeness, and also taken care of down the road long after they are no longer participating in athletics at the university. So at this time, with the chair's permission, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Ross and Ms. Armstrong to share their stories about how they have been involved in this and why this is so important to them.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Speaker Frierson. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Karina Armstrong for the record. First and foremost, I just want to thank you for allowing Sebastian and I to be here today to present. What started off as a writing competition in our law school has turned into this, and we're just very thankful and blessed for the opportunity. This bill is important to me because I am a former collegiate athlete at both the Mountain West and at Atlantic Coast Conference School. And I saw firsthand how much money colleges make off of their athletes. But personally, I saw how much my teammates and other athletes struggled financially during our time as athletes. I think when people see or learn about this bill, they like to think of the big sports, such as like men's basketball, football. Those are the big revenue generating college sports. I personally think about the so-called smaller sports because that's what I was a part of. I was on the track and field team. And the NCAA likes to call these sports equivalency sports, which means student athletes on these sports teams can get anywhere from 1% to 100% of a full ride scholarship. But they still are required to do everything that, say, a student athlete on a full ride scholarship is to do. So these sports include track and field, swim and dive, gymnastics, tennis, all of the above, pretty much, softball. Currently, athletes in these sports, they can't even get paid for giving a sports lesson to a young kid for just by a parent. And I think that many of these athletes, they're not on full ride scholarships. They are participating and can't hold a job because they have practice. And a lot of them send money back home to help their families. And as much as people like to think that that's not something that happens, it does. And I watched it firsthand of my teammates sending money back home to family members to help them out. So being able to make money for something as simple as a lesson to a kid, or going to a local business and just being there for the opening, and taking pictures with kids that are excited to see them, I think is really important and beneficial for them in the long run when they don't have time to work. And I think that athletes in these smaller sports, they do everything that men's basketball players do, everything that the football players do, but they peak a lot of the times in college. And so I think that this bill allows them to make money off their name, image, and likeness when they're at their peak. And I think that even though their peak may be in college, that shouldn't prohibit them from receiving compensation for something as little as giving a lesson to a kid for softball or baseball. So this bill provides opportunity to all college athletes to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness, but it's for their hard work, their dedication, and their time that they put into not only their sport, but also the college and the teams that they're on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Sebastian Ross, and I'm a student at the William S. Boyd School of Law, and also serve as editor-in-chief for the UNLV Gaming Law Journal. My colleague Karina and I were presented with an opportunity during our first semester of law school, as she spoke to participate in a competition that was sponsored by the Boyd Policy and Legislation Society. Now, given the countless hours that we spent on our own athletic careers, crafting legislation that was geared towards student-athlete equity made sense to us. Now, I'm a former Division III player, and although my Division III athletic experience differs from my two colleagues and my co-presenters, my brief playing stint enlightened me about business principles regarding institutional profit at the collegiate level. Another imperative lesson I learned came from my teammates. It becomes very easy to characterize your teammates as family, and I remember seeing my brother struggle financially as well as exercise financial illiteracy. Ordering a Big Mac off the dollar menu ordering a Big Mac instead of something off the dollar menu was not only viewed as a delicacy, but perhaps it was exercising financial literacy as an example. So this happened simultaneously as the university that we played at approved plans for expanding athletic facilities, all while collecting consistently inflating tuition from inner city youth. Now, in candor, there are very few examples of my brothers having the same linear financial gain paralleling the financial growth of our old institution. A number of them are in the same dire financial situation upon which they entered in school. Now, I'm fortunate with an opportunity in furthering my education. A number of my brothers do not share the same fortune. However, one thing many, if not all of us, share is waking up with various physical ailments as the result of our sacrifice. Again, my brothers and I signed up for the D3 pay-to-play model. We assumed the risk for a sacrifice. Unfortunately, I don't know if we would say that the reward came with that risk that we paid. There's no doubt in my mind that hosting a camp or promoting a local business through social media and receiving pay for the work would have made the notion of financial comfort more plausible back then. This bill benefits the quality of life for athletes, contributing to Nevada's economic development. Historically, a number of Nevadans are proud in believing that libertarian values have empowered residents in their success in the economic marketplace. Adoption of this bill gives athletes the opportunity to enter into the marketplace, enabling one to find her or his own value. For some athletes, this might be the only time in their life where they have an opportunity to make money off their athletic ability. So if they want to go out and work, if they want to go out and earn money legally, I think the question then shifts to why would we restrict their autonomy? So in conclusion, I spoke to the work my colleague Karina and I put in. I do want to thank her for dragging me along in this process. Perhaps she'll characterize it as that. I do want to thank Senator Hammond, who sits on this committee. He was a judge in that competition, so I want to thank him for providing feedback and just coaching us up to help us reach our full potential. It's also my recollection and my understanding that you expressed a willingness to sponsor this, and this is something that we appreciate, and we certainly hope that you still have that same sentiment. And I do want to thank Speaker Frierson for advocating on behalf of a demographic of Nevadans that are facing inequity. I do want to thank the LCB staff for their Herculean effort, and I want to thank the members of the committee for their time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, does that conclude the presentation? Okay, so let's go to questions. And you can stay there if you want, and then, yes, Senator Lang.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I may have missed this, but I just, so we all know the NC2A is the ruling body of sports. And so if we make this law in Nevada, does our law supersede what they have, or does our law fit into where they're headed?
Thank you again for the record, Jason Frierson, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. Our law would be state law. And essentially, and I went through the history of how we got here to really lay it out, but the spirit of this bill is really saying it's coming. It's coming from the NC2A, it's coming from Congress, and we need to get out of the way and be ready when it happens. That's essentially what the bill does. The NC2A is a professional structure, but it is not a legislature. So they would have to abide by the laws of any state where they exist, and that would be no exception here in Nevada as well.
So they couldn't sanction us or anything if we allow our athletes, which I think is a really good thing, if we allow our athletes to get compensation for and the use of their name.
Again, Jason Frierson for the records. Senator, what's great about the bill is that the NC2A has already indicated support. And so they have already indicated they support the notion of these college athletes being paid for use of their likeness. And I think that we're just in a transition period where what we want to do is prohibit institutions of higher education from having rules that would conflict with the direction that the country is going.
Yep, Senator Dondarlu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Lewis. My question is this. We have lots of times when athletes go to schools, go to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and do things with kids, which I love because the kids look up to them. It's a great way to not only endorse education, but, activity. Will those be certain times when they need to be paid, or will those still be gratis type activities?
Well, and I have Mr. Ross here to chime in as well. Nothing in this bill requires that a student athlete be paid, or that they mandate that like a school would mandate that they be paid. It just allows for them to be paid if there's a special event or a circumstance where the incentive is for them to be paid, and there's a motivation on the part of the person that's organizing the event to have that presence for that purpose. But nothing in the bill prohibits a student athlete from continuing to do community service the way I think most programs do anyway.
Sebastian Ross for the record. In the interest of brevity, I'm just going to go ahead and ditto that. What I will add onto that is, perhaps we can give the players the benefit of the doubt and we can recognize their humanity and give them the benefit of the doubt in thinking that they'll still want to do this out of the kindness of their heart for free.
Thank you. And my only concern was, the only reason I even brought it up is because I was afraid, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, so now is the university system going to pass that along to the schools and say, well, we can bring 5 basketball players to you, but you need to pay X to do that? And so I was trying not to see that passed along.
Well, thank you again for the record, Jason Frierson. And this AB 254 is specifically designed to protect the athlete, not the institution. So it is really not providing the institution with an opportunity other than, again, getting out of the way of the trend that's happening across the country.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, just a nod to Ms. Armstrong, just hoping that the women athletes get the same respect and honor and pay that our male counterparts do. So thank you for being here today.
Okay, I've got 2, Senator Hammond, and then we're going to go Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Armstrong, thanks. I'm going to try and move this around so I can talk to you. Ms. Armstrong, Mr. Ross, thanks for coming in, and Speaker. Yes, I actually did volunteer to bring the bill. I didn't. By the time you guys got back to me, I had no bill jackets left. I think you are actually in better hands trying to get this thing through than you would be with me. So you landed well. I'm still in favor of the bill. I like the material. I mean, I'm going to date myself, but this goes all the way back to the first time I ever watched a movie called One-on-One with Robbie Benson. There were problems back then that the movie highlighted with collegiate athletes and athletics, and trying to make sure that we're compensating these folks. I know that a lot of people will make the argument that you all get a scholarship, that what you get out of this is a scholarship. Meanwhile, the institution and the NCAA and several other people are making a lot more money on your likeness, on your athletic prowess. I mean, just marketing and getting people to get into the stadiums, into the arenas, getting into the athletic fields, watching you on the track. I mean, that's where the money is really being made. So I do like the direction, and I like that we're pushing this. That this is actually pushing the NCAA to look at how can we be fair to student athletes, and many of them, and especially in Division III, where you're not going to get that same sort of medical attention that you would be in a Division I school. I know that in junior college, for example, sometimes those poor athletes are used up. And they're used up and then discarded when they can't play anymore. So I'm in favor of this. The one thing that I was looking at is it really concentrates on athletes, and the reality is we're seeing students in different fields, really accelerate and get into the public. I mean, you've got esports as well that are really coming out on campuses. I'm thinking that at some point, I guess the only question I have, I mean, first of all, accolades is all I'm going to level upon the 2 of you guys for all the work you guys did. But I think that at some point we have to start looking at how do you look at the other students? Because I like the marketing component. You got to take a class and you got to learn how to contract to get the best deal out of a situation, that kind of thing. I like that, but maybe expanding it at some point in the future. If you wanted to comment on that, that'd be fine.
Sure. Again, Jason Frierson for the record. Thank you, Senator Hammond, and I know your experience with athletes and coaching and seeing those kids come up and going through the process. You're probably more familiar with it than a lot. I think that the distinction is the other students that you're talking about are not contractually limited in doing so, whereas a student athlete and one on scholarship or on a team are currently expressly prohibited from being able to do that. So part of this bill refers the matter to the interim to look at it further. I agree with you, especially in this digital age where if there's, for example, an entrepreneurial student who is famous on TikTok and is unable to reap the benefits of that if the university policy prohibits it, would certainly be open and hope that they would explore that possibility during the next interim. But I think, and Ms. Armstrong was very articulate in giving examples. Those examples are real. Those happened to her. That happened to me. I am familiar with Northern Nevada because I couldn't afford to go home on certain holidays. And I, for example, when school ended, I was in the dorms. But for the summer, if I couldn't afford to go home, I had to find an apartment, which means I had to have a deposit, and I had no source of income to secure an apartment. And we were also sending money home to our families to help subsidize that. So those were unexpected consequences of getting a scholarship and not really seeing it all the way through that these athletes find themselves in and wanting to be able to teach a summer camp and wanting to be able to take advantage of the opportunity to be present in the community when there's an interest in it. So I say all of that to stress that this is an effort to address a today problem, and I think we should absolutely be open to supporting students across the board to the extent that they would be otherwise limited from doing so. But I think the point of this one was because they are contractually limited currently based on their scholarship and their participation on the team from being able to do so. But if there was any other student that was limited in a similar fashion, I would certainly expect that the interim study would take a look at that.
Thank you, and I agree, and I appreciate that answer, because I think you're right. The study has to look at, are there other ones out there, and other things that we might be able to find out in doing a study. And to your point, not only do you not have the funds, some athletes just don't have the money coming from their families or whatnot, but you have certain times of the day you have to be at practice, and it's for some it's several hours out of a day, and you don't have the flexibility to get a job. The only other thing that I did notice is that the makeup of the committee, I'm seeing this more and more often, that when you look at a council or a committee that you put together, that we're putting one person that's selected by the majority leader, one person selected by the speaker. I mean, I would hope that we could kind of expand that and allow the minority party to actually have a say in some of the some of the things that go on. That would be nice to be able to choose somebody that can go on there and give some feedback.
Thank you again, and for the record, Jason Frierson, I don't disagree. I think there's a certain level of accountability with the ability to appoint. I can say that comfortably, if you, Senator Hammer, were still in the Assembly, you'd probably be at the top of my list of people with experience and knowledge about this that would be appropriate to be appointed to that committee. And I don't think there's anything that precludes either that scenario or collaboration between the leaders to make sure that it's a worthwhile appointment.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, this is wonderful. I'm just concerned about the transfer to another state that doesn't have this. So, we transfer athletes now. So is this going to put a crimp in somebody else's transfer to another state? Is it going to affect Olympics? And is it going to allow my athlete who knows what they're doing to not be able to coach a kid in a high school or something else? So I don't read that particular thing in the bill. Can you help me out?
Well, and I'm sorry again, Jason Frierson, for the record. I think there were three parts. I can certainly address the first question about athletes going to other states. You're absolutely right, and that's why Congress is concerned, because they believe that there should be a consistent policy across the whole country, and I believe that they're going to look at taking that up in their next congressional session. I think the NC2A is also looking at having a single rule throughout the country. So we can't control what other states do, but we can certainly be a leader and be an example. And in my intro, we talked about there being 33 states that are now looking at this. So I think as this movement continues to go forward, you're going to see fewer and fewer states that are not consistent with what is going to ultimately be the policy that Congress and or the NC2A puts on them inevitably anyway.
So your alumnus university just came out in the paper that they don't like transfer of students, but they want to get them. So if we do this, maybe it'll keep our good ones here and they can't transfer somewhere else to those other 17 states. The Olympics I had the question about, but I heard the plea for my my athletes to do something with their prowess in the coaching ability. Is that addressed in here?
Thank you again for the record, Jason Frierson. I don't want to speak to the Olympics because that's an entire different governing body, but to the extent that you are referencing coaching, and those are the activities that are expressly intended to be covered in allowing an athlete to be able to be compensated. Because right now, it's difficult for an athlete to be compensated at all, not just for use of their name or likeness, but compensated at all. They're frequently prohibited from working during the school year anyway. And so this is intended to allow them to be able to take advantage of the notoriety that they have developed in their community. And if there's value there, be compensated for it, whether it's use of their likeness, whether it's autographs or coaching for, Olympics or any other off-season sport.
That was just my question, because I didn't see anything in here that allowed a student athlete on the collegiate level to coach on a lower level and get paid for it. That was because I heard that but didn't see it in the bill.
Well, thank you again, Jason Frierson, for the record. I think that the crux of the issue is that the language in the contracts that students sign when they sign on to participate prohibit them from being able to make money. And so it's not so much focused on what the money is for specifically as much as currently they're not allowed to make money at all.
Senator Lang.
Hi, Speaker Frierson. I have one more question. So we have high school athletes that are really, really great, and we have top 10 college or top 10 high school basketball players, top 10 football players, and the list goes on and on. Once, and this may be something that the committee would address, but once a high school athlete has signed with a college, is that the moment that they could start earning money for things, being, you know what I'm trying to say? Or would it be once the season actually starts or once the school year actually starts?
Thank you again, Jason Frierson, for the record. I don't want to speak to the high school nature of it, and certainly to an underage if they're not 18 years old, because then there's legal issues with respect to capacity, confidence to sign a contract. But I think when you are contractually bound, when you sign a contract, then this would kick in theory. And you would be able to, even before you leave your hometown, be able to take advantage of contractual freedom to be prepared as soon as you are under that contract. And the contracts of the universities, again, that's the crux of it. That's where the limitations currently exist that this bill would remove.
So I think when kids sign to go to a college, that's going to be a really great time. I mean, it's going to change everything for them. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Okay, it's a great bill, long time coming. So let's see what, we have no other questions at this point. So let's go to those that might want to speak in support or otherwise. So we will open the hearing, we'll open the testimony in support of Senate Bill 254. Anyone here in the room wishing to speak in support? Not seeing any. BPS, if we could queue up anybody that's here to speak on support online.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support on AB 254, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in support on AB 254, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 135, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin. Once again, caller with the last 3 digits, 135, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Michael Flores for the record, Michael. Flores, on behalf of the University of Nevada, Reno. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just want to thank the sponsor of the bill, Speaker Frierson, and former UNR football star for bringing this bill forward, and also Mr. Ross and Ms. Armstrong from UNLV. And I actually worked with them on the Policy and Legislative Society when they presented this. I served as a judge, and so was honored to hear them present this initially there, and to see where this has gone is really impressive. We're currently monitoring bills at the federal level and working with the NC2A on all the action happening on this, and obviously watching closely what's happening at the federal level. But I want to thank the Speaker for working with us on this bill, and look forward to working with him during the interim with this interim committee to do what's best for our student athletes in our state. And we are in full support of AB 254. And thank you again.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 398, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Sabra Newby, SABRA-NEWBY, representing the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, in strong support of AB 254. I'd like to thank the Speaker of the Assembly for bringing forward this legislation, and also to our fantastic UNLV students for presenting it so well. We have been able to work with Mr. Speaker on a number of amendments in the other house and are fully supportive of this bill. I also want to just state that UNLV is, of course, a student-centered and focused institution, and so we view this legislation and legislation at the federal level as being supportive of our student athletes. And for those reasons and more, we are supportive of this piece of legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
If you have recently joined the call and would like to testify in support on AB 254, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, thank you. So let's go then to testimony. Anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition? Anyone here in the room? Not seeing any. If we could queue up the first person online.
If you would like to testify in opposition on AB 254, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in opposition on AB 254, please press star 9. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Great, thank you. Let's go then to anyone wishing to give testify in neutral on the bill here in the room. Seeing none, let's go to those that are online.
Testify in neutral on AB 254, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in neutral on AB 254, please press star 9. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Any closing thoughts?
Again, Jason Frierson for the record. Ordinarily, I would bypass any closing remarks, especially with such short testimony, but I really want to thank Mr. Ross and Ms. Armstrong for all their hard work over the years, and for them to be able to see their hard work come to fruition in a bill and have them come up here to testify in support of it in person, I think speaks volumes to their passion about this issue and the work that they've got done to get us here. So I really wanted to make sure to thank them again for their work and for being so passionate about it that they wanted to come up here in person to experience this. So thank you all for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions subsequent if there are any that develop.
Thank you.
no questions, but I just, to the speaker's point earlier about his injuries, I don't know if everybody else heard it, but as soon as he got up, I could hear it in his knees. I feel for you.
Just wait till the weather changes, it gets louder.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for being here with us. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 254, and we will open the hearing on AB 88. I saw Assemblyman Watts here. Assembly Bill 88. We're just going back up to the top now. We're just going to do those in order. So, welcome to our committee. Great to have you here, and look forward to hearing your bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Assemblyman Howard Watts, representing District 15 in Clark County. Thank you for allowing me to present Assembly Bill 88 for your consideration today. First, I'd like to start by recognizing that we are gathered on the occupied territory of the Washoe people, who have served as stewards of this land since time immemorial. Joining me to assist in the presentation of this bill today is Teresa Melendez, who is available on Zoom. I'd like to start by providing some brief context around the bill before turning it over to Ms. Melendez to share her perspective. After that, I'd be glad to walk you through the bill if you'd like, and then we can stand for any questions that you have. It comes as no surprise that Nevada and our nation have a complicated and conflict-filled racial history. From slavery and genocide to discrimination, the actions of the past ripple forward into the present and require us to recognize and address the lingering effects. One of the legacies of this that periodically needs to be looked at is the language and symbolism that we use, as we look back and realize that the things that were once acceptable and commonplace are not any longer. Assembly Bill 88 looks at this in two areas: our school identities and our place names. Additionally, after consultation with Native leaders in the state, I've submitted a proposed amendment that should be available online that would address a third area, so-called sundowner sirens. I'll try and keep my remarks very brief and just note, I think this is an issue whose time has come. We've seen in relation to mascots, team identities, changes both in professional sports from the Washington football team, the Cleveland baseball team, as well as right here at home with the retiring of Hey Reb at UNLV, efforts to address some of these issues. I'd also mention in regards to place names that this is also an effort that's ongoing. We recently renamed a peak in Great Basin National Park that was named for Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, to Dosodoyabe, the original Shoshone name for the mountain. And research that was conducted in 2015 by a group called Vocative cross-referenced every term in a database of racial slurs against the 2.2 million official names tracked by the USGS and found more than 1,400 places containing racial slurs in their names, including 60 here in the state of Nevada. With that, I'd just say, at that point, I'm going to pause and turn it over to Ms. Melendez to share some of her perspective, and then I'll give a brief closing remarks before we open it up to questions.
Great, thanks. Ms. Melendez.
Hello, for the record, my name is Teresa Melendez, Teresa Melendez, Melendez. And I am a citizen of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians from Southwest Michigan, and a former resident of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and a current resident of Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for having me today, and thank you to Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward this important bill. I want to highlight something that Assemblyman Watts said. He mentioned that, we have a sordid history with Indigenous people in this continent, and it's it's uplifting to see that states like Nevada are recognizing that history and taking steps to rectify some of the historic wrongs. And this bill is a great step forward in acknowledging the racist practices in history here in Nevada, and then finding solutions and moving things forward. So thank you to the committee for hearing this bill and for your time. So I just want to speak a little bit on each one of the points that Howard mentioned. First, on the first, I want to talk about the Indian mascot bill. So there is a national trend recognizing that Indian mascots are a racist, outdated practice. We now even have some excellent research on the topic. I want to share some of that with you. I'm going to share my screen. There's an organization called Illuminative. They do magnificent work. They work to uplift Indigenous voices and narratives and making our truth visible to the larger population. It's time that we start telling our own histories and stories. And Illuminative has done research on the Indian mascot phenomena, which needs to be retired. And these are some of their findings. So Illuminative shares that through their study, they share that racist mascots increase negative stereotypes of Native people and creates the false perception of Native people as aggressive. Native mascots and fan behavior associated with the use of Native mascots impacts Native youth by lowering self-esteem, increasing rates of depression, increasing rates of self-harm and substance abuse, and increasing discrimination in schools against Native students and athletes. There's a lot of great information on this website. I encourage you guys to check it out. The campaign is called Change the Name, and the organization is Illuminative. So in Indigenous communities, we're used to being told that our perceptions are not reality and that our histories are often whitewashed, or we're just seen, not even recognized at all. And so we're grateful that this bill is being proposed. I hope that it's taken seriously, the impact of the bill. When this bill was heard in front of the Committee on Education with the Assembly, there were several really passionate callers who called in and gave their personal testimony about what it meant to them as Native athletes and collegiate athletes competing against schools with Indian mascots or playing for a school with an Indian mascot, and how as young people, as growing and developing young students, how they were subject to racial slurs and actions. And I even remember in my experience as a young person in Michigan, like homecoming week, driving through the city of Tecumseh, Michigan, where they had, Tecumseh is a notable Indigenous leader from the Midwest. And like all through like downtown, there'd be signs or paintings in all of the store windows that'd be like, scalp the Indians, massacre the Indians, kill the Indians. And so people who haven't lived that history, where those types of thoughts, those types of words are directed towards them and are a reality of their ancestors' history, those are really harmful and those are really hurtful things. And so the argument is that schools are honoring Indigenous people when they use Indian mascots, where we know the majority of Indigenous people in the United States say that they don't feel like they're being honored, and the actions of fans are often discriminatory and seen as racist. Simply, they are racist. And so Indigenous people for decades now have been asking that Indian mascots be prohibited in the K-12 system and the collegiate and professional athletics. There is a trend across the United States. This conversation is being recognized and as a legitimate conversation, legitimate need to remedying race relations in the United States and acknowledging Indigenous people. And so I'm really grateful for this bill, and I hope to see it pass. I also want to talk a little bit about place names. Assemblyman Watts talked about the renaming of a place name here in Nevada. And I just want to remind everybody that the Washoe, Shoshone, and Paiute people whose creation story puts them in this place, they believe that they've always lived in this place. They have always been from this place. They've already named all the lakes and the rivers and the mountains and the valleys of the state. Each one of those traditional places has been renamed by the settlers who've stolen their ancestral homeland. So the practice of now renaming those places and maybe converting them back to their traditional names, which would be a beautiful practice and gesture. I hope to see that move forward, but at the least, if we can rename those place names to something that's not racist, that would be a great move forward also. And then thirdly, the sundown sirens. There are several sundown sirens in the state of Nevada. One specifically I'll draw your attention to is the Minden siren in Douglas County. The tribe there on those traditional homelands are the Washoe tribe of Nevada and California. The tribal chairman of that community has sent a letter to the Douglas County and the town of Minden asking them to stop ringing the siren. And their response was that the siren no longer signals that communities of color need to return to their home before the sun goes down, but now it's honoring first responders. So when messages like that are expressed, the communities who've been oppressed by those practices know that their concerns are not being taken seriously and are dismissed. So everybody who comes from the communities that have been oppressed by sundown sirens knows what those sirens mean, what they have historically meant, and it's hurtful, and it's still hurtful. It's like having PTSD. Like twice a day you hear this siren that reminds you of the oppression that your ancestors have experienced. And the thing about Nevada is a lot of the practices here are very recent. A lot of times we talk about discriminatory practices. We think about, our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents generations, but the Indian boarding schools weren't shut down until 1980 here in the state of Nevada, when the last open boarding schools in the country. So I know I hope we have a few callers who are going to join us and share some more personal stories about what the sundown siren has meant to them and their life living in Minden, about what it meant for them playing on teams that continue to use Indian mascots, so you can hear their story specifically. And I thank you for your time. Thank you, Howard Watts, for bringing this bill forward. And I'd like to take any questions any of the committee members may have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just give a brief comment, and then if you'd like, from there I can walk you through the bill. I know it is pretty short, so I can also just go straight into questions. So I'd just like to close by saying that some people have said in addressing these issues that they're concerned that we're erasing history, and I disagree with that characterization. What this bill does is create processes and dialogue, all of which will be meticulously recorded and become a public record. So in fact, this bill is making history, and it's promoting, I think, necessary conversations for us to have, at our school governance bodies, at our state board on geographic names, as we address these issues. And so it's looking to make changes, but in doing so, I think it also helps bring history forward, and to educate our entire community about some of these issues and their roots. I think ultimately we can find words that and symbols that honor the stories and histories of these places and institutions, while also honoring the diverse cultures and communities that call Nevada home. And I would say that while I think there are particular issues related to indigenous and native people in the state, that the language of the bill applies broadly to racially discriminatory or derogatory language and imagery. I think that by moving this bill forward, we set a strong moral example to others by creating a process where we can all come together publicly to discuss and address these historical inequities. the one other item that I would mention that's of local importance would be the Alpine Meadows Ski Resort, which is just over the border in California. Just a couple of months ago, decided to change the Squaw Valley name after talking with indigenous community members and leaders. And that's looking to continue that work because that term is also used repeatedly in place names in Nevada's landscape, is something that we would be looking to address moving forward with this bill. So with that, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can describe the sections of the bill, or we can immediately go into questions.
If you would just real quickly describe the bill, and then we'll go into questions.
Of course, thank you. Section 1 of this bill requires that the Board of Trustees for each school district and governing board of each charter school in the state adopt a policy that prohibits the usage of names, logos, mascots, songs, or other identifiers that are racially discriminatory. Should a school choose to use an identifier associated with a federally recognized Indian tribe, the board must obtain permission for the use of this identifier from that tribe. And as you'll hear in some of the testimony, this is a really difficult topic, but we do know that there are, in some cases, maybe schools located on tribal land that primarily serve indigenous students, or in some cases there are schools, including those located here, that have received permission from a local tribal government for the use of that imagery. That doesn't mean that every indigenous person agrees with that, but we are trying to create a process that engages tribal governments and creates a process for them to be involved and ultimately provide approval if they do not see it as derogatory or discriminatory. Section 3 of the bill establishes a policy mandate for the Nevada State Board on Geographic Names to recommend new names for landmarks that contain racially derogatory language. So that's a volunteer-driven body that would review any suggestions that are made for name changes and then submit those recommendations to the U.S. Board on Geographic Names for final action. Those are the two provisions of the bill as written, and then again, we do have an amendment on Nellis addressing the sundowner sirens, which basically would address any use of a siren that's historical use was racially discriminatory in nature, that it cannot be sounded in the future. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that members of the committee may have.
Just a quick question on the amendment. Is that's something that's just coming to us here for first, so it didn't get heard on the assembly side? Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Chair Dennis. Howard Watts for the record. That is correct. We ran out of time, wanted to make sure that it was legally germane to the bill, and also was continuing to have conversations with Native leaders who believed that this was an important component to be added in looking at these topics. And so we're just bringing it forward today.
Thank you. All right, questions? Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of merit to what you're saying, and obviously I don't know enough to give you a list of derogatory names, for instance, and so you probably have compiled, or somebody's compiled those names that some of us have obviously used innocently, but that doesn't excuse the fact that someone else perceives it differently. So I guess I would say, you know, if there's a list of things, we probably ought to know them, and if you have those in your coat, I'd appreciate it if no one else would. The warning siren is interesting. You know, I spent time in St. Louis where the siren went off, and so you went down in the basement for the tornado. So if there is a use for a siren, that would make better sense than the misuse of a siren, obviously. And so I'm making a list for you. The Legislative Commission, I would feel a whole lot more comfortable if it was the whole legislature instead of the legislative commission making decisions on geographical names that are going to be changed, because that's going to change a lot of things. And then I had the random thought of Carson City. Obviously, Kit Carson has a history, and so, I mean, that's got to be on somebody's list of, what we're doing. And so those were just some random thoughts if you want to address some of those.
I'd be glad to. Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair Dennis, to Senator Howard Watts for the record. Thank you for the questions. I'll try and catch some of those. So first, list of racially derogatory terms or slurs. I can send as follow-up a comprehensive database that has been compiled by some independent researchers of racial slurs. I will also just note that there have been some policies or legislation that have taken specific terms, particularly terms related to indigenous people, and sought to blanket outlaw their use. That's not how Assembly Bill 88 operates. Instead, it tasks, particularly with schools, the governing bodies, school boards, or the governing bodies of charter schools, to essentially put a process in place. And once that process is in place, it would clearly lay out how, if somebody feels that the mascot or term or song, etc., is offensive, then they would be able to bring essentially a complaint forward and say, this is the problem, this is why I feel this is problematic, and then the governing body would go through an open process to evaluate that and make a decision. So it's a bit different in that we're not providing lots of very explicit prescription. I've had some people ask which particular things I'm trying to get rid of, and I'm not trying to tell anybody to get rid of any particular thing. I want to make sure that we have a process in place where these types of issues can be brought forward and discussed, deliberated, and decided in an open way, because sometimes these things have been brought up before and school districts have struggled with how to make those decisions, and then even once they make them, then people don't necessarily feel that the process was fair or inclusive. So that's really what this is looking to remedy. Let's see, I believe you discussed sirens, and I agree, and the language in this is tailored quite narrowly to address sirens that were really created for that. The only purpose they had originally was racially discriminatory, to sound at sundown and at sunrise to indicate when people could or could not be within a specific community, separate from any other sort of siren that has a utility, whether for emergencies or any other purpose. And I think that's important. And as was noted, even if the claim is that it's being the purpose of it being rung now is changed, if it still rings at the same time, I have trouble thinking of something off the top of my head, but if there is something that had a deeply discriminatory history and then somebody was going to do it the exact same way but said it was for a different reason, you could understand why people would still have quite a problem with that. And then last, on the geographic names, so we already have the existing process in place. It is a board that has a variety of appointees and representatives from different governmental entities. There's another bill this session to actually add a representative, I believe, of the Nevada Indian Commission to that body. And so they are already set up, and the process that we have is when naming or suggesting a renaming, it should go through that state body, and then it goes to the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. Technically, all we can do is make a recommendation. The U.S. Board must ultimately make the change. So it wouldn't go through the Legislative Commission or even through the legislature. It would go through this entity, and I believe most, if not all, other states go through a similar process for proposing new names or name changes for geographic features. I think I got most of your thoughts there.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the the way the bill reads, it would be the legislature or the legislative commission.
Thank you for that question, Senator Hardy. Howard Watts for the record. So one of the things, again, to address the concept that we are erasing things and the history of them is, so the component of that in Section 3 is that we would have the board, which already exists, submit a report on an ongoing basis to the legislature about any deliberations and decisions they made specifically in this area. So it's just to provide information back to us on what's happening after the bill it becomes law.
And then Kit Carson.
Thank you, Senator Hardy. Howard Watts for the record. The original bill did actually include language to incorporate people with a racially discriminatory history. Understanding that opens a lot of doors to a lot of conversations and a lot of debate. I think that the debate is needed at certain points, but I wanted to start by getting a policy in place that addresses truly the most egregious discriminatory examples. I think what you're seeing is there's a lot of things named after people who have complicated histories. There are likely positives and negatives to many people. And of course, particularly in Clark County, we have a lot of schools named after a lot of people. And upon closer review, I'm sure that you can find some questionable or problematic aspects to their histories. So we took that section out of the bill. So this is really just focusing on language or symbols that are themselves derogatory or discriminatory, not addressing things that are named after people.
Good job, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Senator Beñate.
Thank you so much, Chair Dennis. And, I'm actually really glad that this policy came forward. I was proud of my alma mater, UNLV, when they decided to make the change. And my main question for you, Assemblyman, is what happens if a school refuses to change their mascot even after it was already determined that it was quite offensive? Is there provisions that can address that, or how to move forward?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Senator Beñate. Howard Watts for the record. Again, this bill really, it creates, the mandate within this bill is to create a process where the discussion and decision can happen. And we're also essentially setting a public policy position from the state that these things should be addressed. But I don't think it makes sense for the legislature to try and decide every individual case through statute. So ultimately, we're asking that those governing bodies of the schools create those processes so that they can have the discussion and make a decision in an open and transparent way. After that decision is made, I think any existing policies that might be in place to challenge that would apply. We're not creating anything new here. A decision could always be revisited at some point in the future as well. So I know that's not an extremely specific answer, but we just didn't want to be overly prescriptive in terms of describing exactly what the steps of the process should look like, exactly what any appeal would look like, and I would assume that it would follow existing procedures for any other decisions, for example, that a school board may make.
Any other questions? Okay. We will then go to those that wish to give comment or testimony in support of Assembly Bill 88. So anyone wishing to give, anyone here, if you'll come forward. We do have some here, so we'll go those first and then we'll go to those online.
Hello, my name is Will Adler. I'm here representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. Pyramid Lake would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward AB 88 and again thank the concept of AB 88 and what it wishes to do. AB 88 will look to stimulate a conversation about these landmarks and these names and these things to try and educate folks, as well as, you know, meet them halfway, as I see it, on some of these key issues on inclusion and, you know, bringing some of those racial conversations forward on some very old names and some different areas across the state. So again, we want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward AB 88 and the intent of what it wishes to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. As Assembly Member Watts said, it is the time. NSCA wholeheartedly supports AB 88, prohibiting the use of any name, logo, mascot, song, or other identifier that is racially discriminatory in Nevada schools. At our 1991 Representative Assembly, the National Education Association adopted a new business item to discourage the initiation and continued use of prejudicial and derogatory names and symbols of ethnic groups for schools, sporting teams, and mascots. In the last 30 years, we have reaffirmed this position on numerous occasions because educators have long known the use of racially discriminatory language and symbols in schools is wrong and contributes to a hostile learning environment for many students of color. 20 years ago, the United States Commission on Civil Rights issued a strong statement calling for the end of use of Native images and team names by non-Native schools. I'll read the statement. The stereotyping of any racial, ethnic, religious, or other groups when promoted by our public education institutions teaches all students that stereotyping of minority groups is acceptable, a dangerous lesson in a diverse society. Schools have a responsibility to educate their students. They should not use their influence to perpetuate misrepresentations of any culture or people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to give testimony and support here? Don't see any, so if we could go to those that, if we could queue up those that are in support that are online.
If you would like to testify in support on AB 88, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in support on AB 88, please press star 9. Caller with the last 3 digits, 130, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINE SAUNDERS, Policy Director representing the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of AB 88. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward, and especially for the proposed amendment today ending the use of sundown sirens. 2020 was a year of reckoning like none before, where hundreds of thousands of people across the nation took to the streets to demand action to address systemic racism. And yet there are many terms still utilized in our state which retain a connection to overt racist systems of oppression. Mascots of Confederate generals have been symbolic of white supremacy culture as they serve as a reminder of the Civil War and the slaveholding South. And indigenous mascots are a form of cultural appropriation, the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, and ideas of one or more marginalized society, typically by more dominant people, often presenting stereotypical images that desecrate traditions. In addition, there have been real impacts of racial stereotyping, inaccurate racial portrayals, particularly in a place of learning. They've been found to be harmful to the self-esteem and development of BIPOC communities. In fact, the American Psychological Association called for an end to using indigenous mascots over 15 years ago because of the concern for students. In the past year, we have seen brands like Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, and Cream of Wheat, Land O'Lakes, and Disneyland have all committed to making changes to their racist imagery. It is long past due for Nevada to acknowledge our past and make amends to the diverse population who call this state home. We ask that you pass Assembly Bill 88. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 728, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair Dennis and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade Williams. MARLAMC, capital DAGEWILLIAMS, with Strategies 360, speaking today on behalf of the Reno-Sparks Indian Colony. The RSIC would like to go on record in support of AB 88. In 2014, Chairman Arlen Melendez joined other leaders throughout Indian country to speak out against racially offensive mascot names. At that time, the National Congress of American Indians adopted a resolution noting that, quote, the limited and sparse representations of Native Americans in the media and popular culture comprise a significant portion of what children learn about Native people and thereby impact their identity formation by reinforcing stereotypes about Native cultures from the past and present, end quote. On a personal note, I went to Elko High School, whose mascot is the Indians. There's certainly been some awareness in that community because at some point the caricatured Indian head was changed to be a more respectful representation of a Native headdress. However, today there are competing online petitions advocating for and against keeping the mascot. I was a Native student athlete at Elko High, and I had to compartmentalize and separate myself from my school's mascot. As a student, you're powerless to do anything else, and you have a mixed sense of pride for your school. Further, some of you may have seen the comments this week where someone with a national platform said, quote, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, there isn't much Native American culture in American culture, end quote. Until our institutions and laws start recognizing that Natives are more than a mascot, this view will continue to be expressed in our state and in this country. In closing, we support the proposed amendment as well, and we want to extend our appreciation to Assemblyman Watts for bringing this legislation and drawing attention to these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits 094, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Gurule, ALYSSAGURULE. I am an intern with Battleborn Progress and a student at the College of Southern Nevada. We support AB 88 because it is past time that we prohibit the use of these racially derogatory identifiers in schools. Racism has been deeply ingrained in the fabric of our society. This has made it difficult for communities to confront the racism that exists within our system. Nevada can become a state that will lead on this issue and confront it by passing this bill. We have recently seen UNLV retire its mascot. While it was a decision that took a while, it was still very much necessary. We cannot allow this to happen again in the state of Nevada. The use of racially discriminatory identifiers can perpetuate racial stereotypes and have harmful effects on our students in Nevada. There are studies that have shown that exposure to Native youth of Native stereotypes and racist mascots can become damaging to their self-esteem. It is crucial that we are creating a welcoming environment for everyone in our state. Passing AB 88 would ensure that we are finding a way to honor these different communities rather than continuing to use them in a way that is dehumanizing. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits 155, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI-CABRERA, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Director of the Nevada Conservation League, here in strong support of AB 88. We are especially supportive of Section 3, which requires the Nevada State Board of Geographic Names to recommend changes to the names of geographic features and places that are racially discriminatory. Broken and racist systems must be addressed before we can truly have a healthy and just environment. And it's past time to change the offensive names of public lands and spaces. Our public lands and historic sites tell a unique story about Nevada's history and should reflect a narrative that is inclusive of communities who have made a positive and lasting contribution to our state. While our country continues to reckon with our racist and bigoted past, this is an important step Nevada can take to rightfully reclaim and retell our history in a manner that honors those who came before us and allow our country to heal from the hurtful and dangerous narratives of the past. The outdoors are and should be a space for everyone, and all people should feel welcome across every part of our state. We are grateful to Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward, and we strongly urge the committee's support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 202. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Paige Barnes, Paigebarnes. I'm here today representing the Nevada Association of School Boards. We are here in support of AB 88, the creation of a process established in the bill and the intent to respect all of Nevada's communities. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward the bill and encourage you all to support it. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 262. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hi, I'm Sarah Park, Sarahpark, Chair Dennis and members of the committee. I'm a volunteer member of the Sierra Club's Legislative Committee. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 30,000 members and supporters statewide, I'm speaking in support of AB 88. I am a female of color in a public high school, and I believe this bill is very important. I have faced racism in the system. It is inevitable, but I could not fathom a racial slur about me being celebrated to build school spirit. However, that situation is status quo for many minorities. Many mascots, names, identifiers, and more are appropriated after our culture, especially Native American culture. Too often in the past, names that disrespected indigenous cultures or insulted other races were referred to white, gays, and view. Not only is this harmful to the groups affected, it reinforces false and harmful stereotypes. This virulent racist practice should be prohibited. The U.S. is founded on tenets of equality, and permitting these racist identifiers is harmful to individuals and entire communities in our country. We at Sierra Club are working hard to make changes so everyone of all ages, ethnicities, genders, religions, LGBTQ+, etc. are included, welcome, and comfortable. We hope this will be adopted by others so that schools and public buildings will be included. Thanks to this legislation, Nevada can be a model for this country. Every entity should actively seek to promote equality and create equitable, safe spaces. Sierra Club's mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet, but that is impossible if all people do not feel welcome in our shared public spaces. This needs to happen in our criminal justice, education, and healthcare systems as well, all of which fail communities of color at far greater rates than white people. We appreciate this bill for the process it sets forth to heal the sting of racist names in a variety of ways they appear in Nevada and at the broad scale necessary. For these reasons, we urge you to support AB 88. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 398. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dennis and members of the Senate Education Committee. This is Sabra Newby, SABRANEWBY, representing the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in support of AB 88. I want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this important issue forward. UNLV, as you know, put its mascot Hey Reb on leave last spring and officially retired him in January of this year. We believe this action was an important step towards achieving social justice. U.S. News and World Report ranks UNLV as the second most diverse university in the United States. Actively working towards anti-racism and equity isn't just the right thing to do. It's part of our student-centered approach for our diverse community of students, faculty, and staff. For this reason, we are in strong support of AB 88. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 411. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, this is Lindsay Anderson, LINDSAYANDERSON, on behalf of the Washoe County School District. We are here in support of Assembly Bill 88. I'd like to thank Assemblyman Watts for meeting with us earlier this session. This policy is in line with our currently adopted anti-racism policy, and our school naming committee takes this work very seriously. We look forward to fully adopting this into our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Chair Dennis, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Let's go to those wishing to give testimony in opposition. If If you'd cue that. Is anyone here in the room? Don't see anyone. So let's go those online.
If you would like to testify in opposition on AB 88, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to those in neutral. Anyone here in the room? Nobody here. If we go to those online.
To testify in neutral on AB 88, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Okay, Assemblyman Watts, any closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Howard Watts for the record. Briefly, I just say that those who spoke in support did a better job than I could. So I just lift up the remarks that you've heard on this and reiterate that these are often difficult conversations, but they're important conversations for us to have. And I believe that AB 88 is a smart next step towards having these conversations and addressing some of the issues as a result of our history in this state. So I thank you for your time. I will send some additional follow-up information to the committee for your awareness and urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 88 and open the hearing on AB 169. I know. Assemblywoman Considine, welcome to our committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Dennis. Thank you, Vice Chair Dondero Loop, and members of the Senate Committee on Education. It's nice to meet you all. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Venetia Considine. I am Assemblywoman for Assembly District 18, and I'm here to present on AB 169, which revises provisions governing higher education. This bill originated as a consumer protection bill, which it still is, but it was a journey for me to learn the depth and the breadth of the private post-secondary education system in the state. You have schools like beginning, at Thoreau University, all the way down into schools that, I know I've heard referred to as like whack-a-mole schools. Well, they'll pop up, and then as soon as somebody is aware that they're doing something unlawful, they'll shut down and they'll pop up somewhere else. So speaking with the Commission on Post-Secondary Education and other stakeholders in this area, came up with some consumer protections for students that want to go to a private post-secondary institution in this state. I think this bill is timely because whenever there is an economic downturn, you have more people that are either out of work or that are readjusting what they want to do in the future, and they are looking to educational institutions to help them bridge from where they are to where they want to be. At the same time, there is a high propensity for new schools to pop up that don't necessarily have the education of the student at the forefront. So trying to find a few things that would bridge these two is where this bill came from. So my goal is to just go through the bill. There are no amendments. There were amendments in the Assembly, and those were accepted. This came out of the Assembly unanimous. So if you have any questions after I go through the bill, please ask those, and I'll go through those as well as I can. Thank you. So in the protections that we created, as I go through these, if there's a specific reason why these were created, I will explain that at that time. So the first one, Section 1, subsections 1 and 2, require that a post-secondary educational institution does not engage in recruiting activities where prospective students cannot reasonably be expected to make informed decisions. Now, this doesn't mean that they can't engage in recruiting activities at a center for employment opportunities operated by or with the support of local, state, or federal government and with the permission of that center. These are for schools that are making promises or reaching out to people in the homeless corridor, or in areas where it is quite clear that folks may not be able to afford to go to necessarily that private secondary institution. So that's where that portion came from. We added words in section 1.3, subsection 1A, current and complete in a catalog to ensure, and this was done with the input of the Commission for Post-Secondary Education, to ensure that the catalog or the brochure has all of the information someone would need to make an educated decision as to whether or not they want to attend this institution. We also, the information must be provided signing an agreement to enroll. So one of the things that I learned during this journey was that agreements to enroll, there were some issues with whether or not, the signing of those was done in an informed manner. So from my point of view in learning all of this, having someone go through the enrollment agreement with an interested student to go over the provisions, to explain what some of these complicated contracts could mean, is very important, because this is someone that is in there for education. And contracts are complicated in many situations, and starting a relationship with a student by explaining all the provisions of an enrollment contract is a respectful thing for both sides, and is also the first step in educating that student who wants to make a better life. That is why it includes a statement that the student or the student's guardian have reviewed each section of the agreement and had the opportunity to ask questions. That the agreement be printed at least 10-point font. I learned that some of these enrollment agreements were as small as a 6-point font or an 8-point font. So I know it may seem weird that we are specifically listing a 10-point font, but that's a minimum 10-point font. And that they include what the cancellation policy for that institution may be. That it provides an agreement that they can cancel no later than 3 days after signing the agreement, and what that cancellation process requires. So if you have ever gone into an entity and you've gone through the agreement and you're very excited about it and you're agreeing to everything that's happened, but you are not having the time to sit back and think, well, wait a minute, can I afford this? Is this where I want to go? Is this the best way for me to go forward? Having a 3-day cancellation policy is fairly standard across a lot of contractual obligation areas, so that's why that was added. Also, further down on page 3, starting on line 34, the enrollment agreement also must include a disclosure page or a prominent link to the disclosure page on the main page of the internet website of the institution. So if someone has questions, any disclosures are easy to find on their website or in their documents in the catalog as well. Include a statement indicating where a person can access the complaint policy of the post-secondary educational institution in the catalog or brochure of the institution or on the main page of the internet website. Again, these are consumer protections. If someone has a complaint and you don't know where to go to get it, you want to make sure that those are easy to find as a consumer. Finally, on this page, the Commission shall adopt regulations imposing a fine against a post-secondary education that fails to comply with everything that I've kind of just gone over. The last change can be found on page 5, starting on line 12. This is section 1.6, subsection 5. We wanted to put in a definition of what it means to substantially fail to furnish the proper education. The word is used, sorry to go backwards, but if you look on page 4 on line 3, that if an institution has substantially failed to furnish the training program agreed upon in the enrollment agreement, the institution shall refund a student all the money the student has paid. That's already in the law. What we wanted to do was give the definition of substantially failed to furnish. So that's why section 5 is in there. It includes canceling and or changing a training program agreed upon in the enrollment agreement. If the institution does that, they must offer the student a fair chance to complete the same program or another program with demonstrated possibility of placement equal or higher to the possibility of placement of the original program, or obtain the written agreement of the student to the specified changes and a statement that the student is not being coerced or forced into accepting these changes, unless the cancellation or change of a program is in response to a change in the requirements of the occupation that the student is in the institution for. Outside of those areas, then the law would require, or constantly does require, that the student gets a refund. So I know that's kind of a lot of information. I wanted to go through the bill. Overall, it's a consumer protection bill for students that are trying to better their economic prospects in our community. So I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Yes, Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the bill. I just have a couple questions. So is this directed mostly at our universities and our community colleges? Is this directed more at a private institution who may provide healthcare training? Is it the trades? Where can you kind of identify when you say educational institution? Can you give me some parameters there?
Thank you for the question. For the record, my name is Venetia Considine, through the chair to the vice chair. This is for private post-secondary institutions, so it does not cover any of the NSHE schools. And these are schools that are overseen by the Commission for Post-Secondary Education, which is located in Dieter. So this does cover like a broader range of schools than I had originally believed. So it does cover for some of the private medical schools all the way down to, or not all the way down, all the way across to some of the occupational schools. It does not include cosmetology schools, but it does cover sort of all of the others. Some of these changes will not affect any schools. The schools, the institutions that I've spoken with throughout this process, the larger ones have not had any issues with any of these changes. Most of them do these already. These are some changes for just, say, some smaller schools. As far as like the size, or they have a single or focus or two focuses, like what you were saying, some of the nursing schools or the assistant schools. So this would apply to all of those that are private post-secondary institutions.
Follow up, please. So just to enhance that a little bit, so would that include HVAC schools? Would it include electrical schools, plumbing schools, any of our trade schools that we may have?
Thank you for the question, Venetia Considine, for the record, through the chair to the vice chair. I believe they do, but what I can do is go back and check with the Commission on Post-Secondary Education to get a specific list, just to make sure that there are none that are outside of this.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate that.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So eventually, one of our goals is to have a school for the blind. So this does not preclude them from starting a school for the blind and having their information in Braille. But it obviously, they can't read 10-point, let alone 6-point. But it doesn't preclude them from doing that in Braille. It just makes sure that we do what we're supposed to do and tell them what our intent is.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Through the chair to Senator Hardy. No, this is a floor for the institutions. This does not stop any institution from doing anything additional, providing more appropriate tools for their students, or an appropriate way for a student to obtain all of this information. Ideally, websites will also be accessible to the blind as well, so this information that would be on the websites just kind of plays right into that, but it is not stopping any institution from giving their students a better access.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you for the another go around. So would this impact when a school closes? So we had schools that closed sort of midway and students were left in a lurch.
So that, the Commission on Post-Secondary Education already has laws on that how the process of getting that funding back and the process of the Commission on Post-Secondary Education going after some of those schools that, that closed without refunding money or any of that. That's already in there. Otherwise, it would have been in this bill. Thank you. For the record, Venetia Considine.
Thank you.
Just one clarification on when it talks about in section 1, where it says shall not engage in recruiting activities where prospective students cannot reasonably be expected to make informed decisions regarding enrollment. Who defines what that is? Is that the commission? Or is that already in statute?
Thank you for the question. Venetia Considine for the record, and to the chair. This was language that was done, that we found in best practices across the country. And there was, in some locations, they did have a defined list of areas. Some of them we did not find would fall necessarily under this. Like the best example, as I said before, was say in the homeless corridor. Other locations had a list where they included like welfare offices. This could be defined through regulation, or it could be defined through the Commission on Post-Secondary Education, but we do not have a defined list. I don't know if legal has wanted to add anything to that.
Mr. Killian, any thoughts on that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So since this is language that would be implemented by the Commission on Post-Secondary Education, to the extent that the plain language isn't sufficient, the Commission would have the authority to adopt any regulations necessary to further define this and to make the language operational.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. Are we ready to take testimony? Is this at the end of your presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we will then go to those wishing to give testimony in support. Anybody here in the room? No one coming forward? Let's go to those online. Anyone wishing to give testimony in support? So BPS, do we have anybody?
If you'd like to testify in support on AB 169, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in support on AB 169, please press star 9. Caller with the last 3 digits, 747, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Chair and committee members, my name for the record is Andrew Lee Pilbett, last name Lepeilbet, and I represent the combat wounded veterans in the state of Nevada of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, the 70,000 disabled American veterans in the state of Nevada, and I am the current chair of the United Veterans Legislative Council, representing 250,000 veterans in our state and 500,000 Nevadans when you include their families. And we are in support of this bill, as we have many veterans that are in these secondary education programs, and this is a good ethical and moral change to the law to protect our veterans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, let's go to those then that are in opposition. Anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition in the room? No one coming forward. any online, if you'd queue up the first one.
If you'd like to testify in opposition on AB 169, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, let's go to those wishing to give testimony in neutral. Nobody here in the room, so if we could queue up the first caller.
If you would like to testify in neutral on AB 169, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 214, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Kelly Wiest, Kellywest. I am the administrator for the Commission on Post-Secondary Education. Hopefully I'll answer a couple of questions that you have asked. Currently, the Commission on Post-Secondary Education licenses 148 institutions from pre-licensing in insurance up to a doctoral level college degrees. This number includes 25 colleges and universities, 23 pre-licensing programs, and 100 institutions offering non-degreed vocational training programs. So last year, we had 29,000 students enroll in a private post-secondary institution as a new student, and we're all required to sign an enrollment agreement and receive a catalog. This bill will have significant impact on future enrollees and their understanding of enrollment contracts. The expansion of the substantially failed to furnish will provide additional protections to students attending institutions that are at risk of closure, not necessarily the ones that closed during training, but the ones that are experiencing problems or operating behind the court-protected receivership. So I would like to thank Assemblywoman Considine for taking the time to meet with myself and the chair of the commission about the language. And I would like to say that this is specifically for private post-secondary institutions, barring cosmetology, barbering, and DMV. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Okay, we will go ahead then and come back. Do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to the bill. And if you have any questions at any time, please reach out to me and I will obtain the list and send it to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 169 and open the hearing on AB 215. Welcome back.
Hello, my name is Venetia Considine, for the record. Thank you, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Dondero Loop, and the committee members, the Senate Education Committee, for hearing AB 215, which is my second bill here today. I do represent Assembly District 18 proudly. I'm here to present on AB 215, which revises provisions governing the eligibility requirements for participation in courses for an adult to earn a high school diploma. The conception of this bill came to me from a constituent, Ms. Leilani Shive, who is on Zoom and will be co-presenting with me today. This is a short bill, but we believe it will have a very big impact on the lives of some young adults in our community. And if it's okay with the committee, I would like to move it over to Ms. Shive to explain the bill.
Thank you, Venetia. Thank you, Chair Dennis and Vice Chair Dondero Loop, as well as the rest of the Education Committee. For the record, my name is Leilani Shive, and I'm here to discuss AB 215 with you. I'm an assistant principal at Sunrise Mountain High School, and I'm also an evening site supervisor for adult education, which I've been doing since about 2013-14 school year, so about 7 years with adult ed. I brought this concern to Assemblywoman Considine because it's something that's been an issue every year for a small group of students. The problem is that every year we have students that contact us and they ask, what do I need to do to finish my diploma? And of course, we look at the transcript first to see how many credits they need so we can determine which program would be in their best interest. And then we look at the age, the birthday. And every year there are roughly a dozen or so students who contact me, and I just want to cringe because They only need a few credits to complete their diploma, but they're only 17 years old. And in some cases, they won't turn 18 until as late as September 30th, which is based on when they started kindergarten. So the way the law currently reads, the student needs to be 18 to go into adult education, into the adult diploma program, so they can finish their credits and their diploma. At 17, they can only go into the high school equivalency program. There's nothing wrong with the HiSET or the GED type program. I myself started with a GED, but I would not recommend it when they just need a few credits to get an actual diploma. So it becomes this crazy waiting period before they can enroll in the diploma program just because of an arbitrary birthday cutoff date. And AB 215 would remedy this problem. It changes the wording to allow students who are 17 but have already attended 4 years of high school without graduating the opportunity to complete their diploma through adult education. Because the reality is we don't want to strike when the iron, we want to strike when the iron is hot. We want to get them enrolled to finish right away while they're ready and they're willing and they're asking for our help, and not have to tell them that they need to wait a few months until they turn 18. Again, I want to emphasize we are not trying to allow 17-year-olds to just quit school and go to an adult diploma program. This is only to assist those 17-year-olds who attended 4 years of high school but did not graduate, to allow them the same opportunity. For example, if you have two students, one is 18, one is 17. 4 years have gone by, neither one of them graduated. The way the law is currently written, that 18-year-old could go right into the diploma program, finish their diploma, boom, done. The 17-year-old would have to wait until they turn 18 in order to go into the diploma program. They would have to go into the HiSET program if they wanted to go to adult ed. They only need a few credits. That would be silly. So thank you again for your time and for listening to me this afternoon. That's AB 215, and I'm also here to answer any questions you may have for me.
Okay.
And if I may sort of follow up on that, I want to emphasize that this is another option for a student. A student in this situation, if they are 17 years old, they have attended high school for 4 years, but they are credit deficient, can choose to go to HiSEC. They can choose to go to summer school, or they can choose, if it works for them under this bill, to go to adult education and complete those credits that way and get their diploma. Again, I think that this bill is timely because we have a lot of students through the pandemic, especially on the east side of Las Vegas where I represent, who are working full-time. If they don't complete all of their credits, they will likely continue to keep working full-time even if they don't graduate. This gives them an option if they do want to graduate and they do not want to wait to, as was said earlier, strike while the iron is hot and get their diploma, so that we have a lot more students obtaining their diplomas in our community. This does affect a small or a narrow area of students because of the birth date for them to go into kindergarten. So this is not a huge amount of students each year. It would be, from the information I was given, a few dozen every year that would be eligible. Doesn't mean that this would be the area that they would choose, but I believe that the more options that we can provide students who want to get their diploma, the better. And I'm available, and Ms. Shive is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have questions. Yes, Senator Don-Darrell-Loop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to chime in here because I know how important the adult education program is. And Ms. Shive, thank you for what you do. It may only impact a few students, but I think right now it's more than a few. And we have students who can't go on to do something like a trade school because they need those diplomas and those credits. So thank you for bringing this bill forward. It's very important to the adult education program, which services, an important population in our communities.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just make sure this applies to credit deficient students, not the student who graduates from high school when he's 14 years old, graduates from college when he's 17, and graduates from medical school when he's 21.
Thank you for the question, Venetia Considine, for the record, through the chair to Senator Hardy. If they've already graduated high school, this doesn't apply at all.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, not hearing any. Let's go to those that wish to give public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment here, go ahead and come forward if in support. We do have someone here, so we'll go there first and then we'll go online.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Erica Valdez, VALDRIZ with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is in support of AB 215. The Chamber believes that this bill addresses the nexus between education and the given growing hiring needs in our state. Finishing high school education will lead to higher earning potentials, more job options, and better opportunities for our community and families. We understand that hardships impact the entire family, not only just the student, and often can lead with underemployment, unemployment, or limited opportunities for economic advancement. Completing their education will not only improve their personal finances and personal confidence, but will also set a great example to their children and also our Nevada students. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for your time. We urge your support for this bill.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Okay, so let's go to those that are online that wish to give testimony in support.
If you would like to testify in support on AB 215, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 650, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin. Once again, caller with the last 3 digits, 650, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. If you're having a hard time unmuting, press star 6.
Hello, this is Eric Gant, ERICGANT, and I am the Executive Director over Adult Education and Corrections for the Clark County School District. I'd like to thank Chairman Dennis and the committee for the time to speak today, as well as Assemblywoman Considine for all her support of AB 215. Obviously, I'm calling in support. I believe our job as educators are to eliminate barriers for student success, and that's exactly what AB 215 does. As Ms. Shive stated, it will help a handful of students to get exactly where they need to be, and so they do not have the delay between finishing school and having to enroll into an adult program when they're 18. So I just want to say that at Clark County School District, we are in support. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 692, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis and Vice Chair Don Darrowloop and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przinski, MaryPierczynski, representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents. And we are in support of this bill. It gives students another opportunity to meet that goal of that high school diploma. And we think it's a great idea. It may impact only a few students, but every student is important. And so we're very supportive of the bill and want to thank the sponsor for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to those wishing to give testimony in opposition. Anyone here in the room? Nobody's coming forward, so if we will go to the first one online.
If you'd like to testify in opposition on AB 215, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Let's go to those wishing to give testimony in neutral. Anyone here in the room? No one's coming forward here. If we could queue up the first caller.
If you would like to testify in neutral on AB 215, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come back and any Assemblywoman Considine, any closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Venetia Considine for the record. I just want to thank all of you for hearing this bill. I believe education is the gateway to opportunity and to build a better life. It's why I moved here 30 years ago. I've been able to build a better life for myself, and I just want to make sure that that is available for others as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 215. And we will go to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment, if you could come. Let's see, anybody here in the room wishing to give public comment? Nobody's coming forward, so let's go to anyone wishing to give public comment online. If we could queue up the first caller.
If you would like to participate in public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to participate in public comment, please press star 9. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. So with that, just giving a heads up to the members that we do have, I think our committee picture is going to be taken sometime here, so it'll get on your calendars, and so be looking for that in the next week or two. So I think that's all we have before us at this point. With that, and having no other items come before us, we will meet on Wednesday. Will be our next meeting. And so with that, we are adjourned.